then, everyone. Can we get started? Hello. Oh, marvellous. Right, thanks everybody. We're here for this session, how can we make renewable energy projects work for communities? We've got some fantastic speakers who've been through the pain and the joy of these types of projects. So we're running a wee bit late, so we're just going to crack on with the speakers, and we'll have time for questions at the end. So if you could save your questions, and then we'll have a Q&A after, at the end of the four speakers actually. So we're starting with Carola.
Hello everybody, I'm Carola Bell. I'm a director of Urras Ghabhsainn, that's Ghabhsainn Estate Trust, at the north end of the Isle of Lewis. We've been in community ownership since 2007. It was a crofting community buyout. We're a very traditional crofting community, and I felt completely at home with both of the two previous speakers talking about land. It's land in here, it's not just land up there to us. When we took over the estate, we wanted to make it an even better place for people to live, to work, to visit. It's a big chunk of land, as you can see. We've got a lot of crofting townships on it. We've got 1,800 people there now. I think we had just under 2,000 when we bought the land, so our population is declining. Quite a lot of households and a lot of community organisations. When we bought the estate, it had an income of marginally over 20,000 a year, and we knew that to do any development, we need an awful lot more than that. It wouldn't pay for half a staff person and a few costs. So with the best wind and wave resource on our shore, renewable energy was an obvious choice. We also wanted to take our land management, take our land seriously, and it was the time of talking about climate change, and we wanted to do something to help that too. So again, renewable energy fitted the bill. The work of the estate is done through a strategic plan. We revise it every 5 years. We review it, we consult and revise it. It's a 20-year plan. It's about it being an exceptional place, it's about care and well-being, it's about crofting and land use and other issues to do with land, and it's about tourism and other job opportunities and these sorts of things. This is just a glimpse. It's not everything we do. We do a vast range of activities now. So we looked at turbines. It seemed an obvious thing to do then. Other people were doing it. It was an easy time to do it in that way. It's not been an easy journey. We started before, as you see, we started before we bought the land. We started to think about it and plan. Because that's an interesting typo, isn't it? Pound S million development cost. I signed that bank loan for 5 million. And I remember the feeling as I signed it and thinking, 10 years ago, no community group would sign any loan for anything, let alone for 5 million. It's okay, I've got over the trauma of signing it by now. We needed, because we did our turbine development in 2 phases because of the subsidy regime, we needed to put up 1 turbine and then wait a year for the second 2. So we needed private money to put in for the bank loan for the second one, so we did a community shares offer. We needed 400,000. We thought we'd have a target of 450,000. People who were talking to us said, in an area like yours, you haven't got a big city. You're not near Edinburgh. That's a bit over-ambitious. Your community will be very disillusioned when you don't make it. Well, red rag to a bull. We set our target at 600,000 and we took in 700,000. So, I suppose that's how we've approached quite a lot of things we've done. 41% of the shareholders came from our estate area, 33% came from the rest of the Outer Hebrides, a quarter, 25% came from the rest of the UK. It was a very rewarding process, I think. we made links with people that we wouldn't have otherwise made links with. Some of them were old friends, some of the people were involved with the community land movement, some of them were people, there was lots of people. Some of them were complete outsiders who saw a little advert and have become kind of Western Isles anoraks over the years because they were so interested in the process. But it's an enduring relationship with these people, and I was delighted. I'm a shareholder of Raasay, so I was delighted to say hello to somebody from Raasay today. People buy little shares in a lot of different projects, and it makes them feel a part of it. And to us, it's been a very good experience. So I would say it's very well worthwhile considering. We produce over twice as much electricity as the total use in our area. So we've done something towards climate change, not nearly enough, but that was a good start. We've had an income which we thought would be 8 million over the years. It at times has been difficult. We had one year when the income had dropped quite a lot and we had to go on to an off-gen tariff. We looked carefully at our bank loan repayments and think about them, but we built up some reserves. We're quite quiet, careful, canny people, really, I think. We had an 11-month period when the subsea cable to the mainland broke, when we could generate nothing, export nothing, make no money, get paid nothing, and you've still got your bank loans to pay off. But that's okay. As I say, we had reserves. In recent years, the income has gone up as the electricity market goes up, our income goes up. At the moment, it's gone up substantially this year. We find that quite a difficult thing to deal with. I find it very difficult to deal with. One side of me is thinking, yes, 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 and the other side of me is thinking, our income's going up as our community's incomes are going down because they're having to pay so much more for electricity. I think that was very good for us. It changed in a way the way we thought. We thought always of strategic landowners, strategic, good, big development projects, and giving some funds to our community, for our community organisations to do the smaller things. Suddenly we felt, I think, more responsibility to do smaller assistance to our community at the household level. And it was a good way for us to think through. And we do support our community. Oh, there's a picture of Agnes. I've got Agnes in it. Look, there she is. So she's always in every picture, either Agnes or me, and generally they're of handing over a large cheque like that one, and I'm rather bored by them, but never mind, that's what the pictures you have are. So through the period of our land ownership, we have 3 times had multinationals want to develop offshore, off our shoreline. First 2 were WAVE. There were lengthy negotiations. They were difficult. They had large budgets for negotiation. We had nothing. Neither of them came to fruition. We now have ScotWind off our shore. Interesting, isn't it, these large offshore developments, how far out from land they are, except the one that's off our shore, which is 3 miles. It's far more impact on a community than when they're far out, and the electricity will be cabled right across the island again, far more impact on a community. There will be a substation on land. So we're going through that negotiation at the moment. I think we are looking, all of the community landowners, we've formed a partnership between all of the community landowners right down that northwest shore and along there. So we feel we need to have a united position with the large company. We're looking for community benefit which is transformational. It's not so important for us. We have a good income. It's very important for a community landowner who doesn't have a good income stream. I'm not saying it's not important for us, but it's more important for some of them, and that's why we've formed a good partnership. Maybe part of that could be electricity. We need to get into all these things, and with new technology and whether cells technology on this, we might be able to get more into that. I would say if anyone ever deals with multinationals, we found the great thing to remember is you might feel like a mouse with a big elephant talking to you, but you hold the little golden key. And it's that sliver of sand if it's an offshore development. And it's your community, because the last thing they want is a community against them. They want the community with them. So never be intimidated. The other thing that we're now considering is maybe, so to the future, maybe we need a new development. And again, we're partnering with our community landowners, our neighbouring ones. We're considering a new onshore wind development on our land. It'll need to be a lot bigger this time. We think probably 30 megawatts. So that S up there will be 50, not 5 this time around. That's an intimidating scale to anybody. But we know we've got to work through the process at this stage. It'll take 8 years or something. You've got to start, or you won't be at the party. We would need space on the interconnector, the new big interconnector to the mainland, to do it. So you have to start. And if we're successful, we're successful. If we're not, well, you've tried as best you can, and you've thought about it all, and you've worked through the feasibility. As to the future, for me, at the other end of the scale, from huge scale renewable energy, well, I think solar is getting much more efficient and much cheaper. I think we need to do it. I couldn't not have sheep in my presentation, although they're not the right kind of sheep, and it's not the right kind of solar. It's much too big a scale. But you know, solar and grazing sheep. I think we really need to think about, as we're going to use much more electricity for transport. Solar doesn't work very well where we are for heat. It works exceptionally well. A lot of people think it won't up in the north. It does work very well in terms of production over a year, but it'll be doing great today. Now, when you don't need heat, it won't be doing so well tonight, and it won't be doing so well in December. But, you know, we're going to be using electricity for a lot of other things, so it must have a role to play. I suppose what I'm saying is that for our community, I think renewables will still be a very important part of what we do in the future. But we need to be creative. I signed up to this workshop to come and hear about the future. I said to Lindsay, I don't want to talk at it. I want to hear the exciting new things. I don't want to tell everyone what we've been doing. But we will, I think, be still doing renewable energy into the future. Thank you.
I think Donald's just offered, because he was saying he didn't really want to speak twice, but I think we should hear him quickly now, if that's all right, Donald. Talking about Huntly, because again, that's a different scale. I think it's really interesting what Carola, and some of you will have heard that story before, but actually, Carola, lots of people won't have heard your story before, and it's one that's always bears repeating. You know, that sitting down and thinking, I'm signing on the line here for £5 million, and yet we've still got local authorities and people in government saying, well, we can't really trust communities, they don't really know what they're doing. So that sort of story is what we need to hear more and more. So anyway, Donald, I'll let you perhaps skip through yours. That's okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, morning, everyone. Thanks. I said morning, everyone. That's good. I was saying to you, Ailsa, that I'm on again after the break, so I was offering to sacrifice this talk and bore you after break rather than beforehand, but I'll dash through this just now and leave time for Raasay to come through. So I'm the General Manager with Huntly Development Trust, and where's Huntly? We're about 3 hours east of here, across in glorious Aberdeenshire, and we as a trust serve that sort of rugby-shaped yellow bit in the middle of the town of Huntly and its surrounding district. That's about 12,000 people in total. The trust itself, that's what we aim to do, and we're trying to do what many people here are doing, is balance that straddle that dilemma of doing good things with and for your community whilst being financially sustainable, holding your trousers up, as they say in Dutch. We came about in 2009 on the back of a previous sort of agency-run initiative, Aberdeenshire Towns Partnership, which was looking to give the sort of major towns, the bigger towns in Aberdeenshire, a bit of a boost. We were last in with 4 years of it, and it got people thinking again about how our market town, which is struggling, and in some ways still is struggling, to change with modern life, how we could adapt and become part of the 21st century. Being a publicly funded enterprise or initiative, priorities changed, the plug was pulled financially, and we were faced with either all going back to do what we'd been doing before, or take on the challenge of starting a new entity, and we did. We took on that challenge and established the Development Trust against a backdrop of challenging financial situation. That was just after the financial crash, and you can see the gap in what was expected to be local authority demand for services versus the supply of finance to provide those services. And that's the sort of gap that I think organisations like many of ours are expected to fill. Whether we can fill it or not is an interesting one. That's our journey. My teenage son's doing maths just now, so I think that's the y-axis on they're going up and down, and against time along the bottom there. So it's my own personal perception. I was involved at the beginning of our chance of survival as an organisation. And you can see that things went well at the beginning. We're getting better when we partnered with the Housing Association that was looking to do renewables. Things went badly wrong in 2013 for a couple of reasons, but land and energy was our saviour. And it's a really good time to say thanks to the Scottish Land Fund, members here who've helped us get that piece of land, a bleak, windy piece of Aberdeenshire hillside, which 63 acres, tiny in comparison to what some of the estates out here are, but it's been transformational for us as a trust. On it we put a single wind turbine, one 500 kilowatt machine, and it was right next to an existing cluster of 7 turbines owned by IKEA, and that was part of our thoughts at the beginning. Was we thought it's easier to get a development up beside an existing cluster. It's going to be perhaps easier both planning-wise, community aspiration-wise, community division-wise. It still took us 6 years to go through the planning process, and it took them 6 days to construct the turbine, which I think is actually quite an interesting parallel. As we were doing that, so that turbine's 100% owned by the Trust. As we were doing that, we were being approached. There was a tremendous overwhelm of wind turbine applications coming to us from all sorts of different places, both within the UK and overseas. So we developed a set of criteria quickly as the Trust about who we would partner with. We were being asked to partner, to almost be like the front man locally for their developments. They knew we were interested. We'd met them at different phases. So we said, okay, we'll develop a set of criteria and we'll test each of the bids against that. And we went with 2 at the end of the day. So this is on the left. You've got Paul Wheelhouse, who was then the Minister for Climate Change, I think, opening a 12 megawatt wind farm in which we have a 10% stake on behalf of the community, with a floor in terms of community benefits. So there's a revenue stream, and if the wind farm does well, we get a 10% share of the profits. If it fails completely, we still get the community benefit coming in. And the other one's a smaller, very small development in a different set of parishes. And important to say, on our 100% owned turbine, we don't run a community benefit or grant fund. We're putting that solely into the Trust and the projects that people have said that they want the Trust to do. But these 2 other developments, we take 25% of the income that comes in from them, and we give that straight over to the local parishes, and they can decide how they want to invest that in projects that they want to do. And it's, I think, again, important to say that there are probably 6 or 7 other wind farms in that immediate area who are offering funds for the community to bid into. It's not that we're being particularly selfish in holding that back, but we're using it to do a range of different things. Anyway, Not all successful. We looked at hydro, we looked at solar. We couldn't make either of those work for different reasons, but not to say we won't go back to trying those in the future. And that is what the energy is powering us to do. We run a green travel scheme to help people get about the area. That's transportation, rural area, despite being on the A96, despite being on the train line. If you're not on those axes, it's very difficult to get around. We've got the farm at Greenmires where the turbine is based. We're doing town centre regeneration works. We've bought 3 buildings. We're redeveloping them because town centre of a Scottish market town is a tricky place to be these days, and various other initiatives. That's our balance sheet, if you like, just now. Lots of good things. Relevant for this is the 1 turbine and the revenue streams it brings. Probably we're not as wealthy as Carola. We've only got £7 million coming in from this over the next 20 years, but we hope to leave our money in with that to be able to do other things. Back in 2018-19, the community did a large consultation, strategic review. What does our community need? And the investment that it thinks it needs is massive, and we will need all of that money and more to be able to do that. And then looking to the future, very briefly, this is the hydrogen office down in Methil in Fife. And in essence, we're looking at the moment, it's a live discussion Tuesday night with a board meeting about whether we're going to pursue something like this. On the bottom left you see the wind turbine, on the bottom right you see the solar panels, and in the middle are the gubbins of taking that power and putting it into an electrolyser, splitting water into hydrogen and oxygen, and the fuel cell, the hydrogen fuel cells are then used to heat, power various parts of that. We're looking at doing something similar, not as compactly as that, and again at a bigger scale, because that's in the post-subsidy world, it will need to be at a bigger scale. That's what we've learned. We've learned a lot more, but that's what I sort of could get down on this. And I think particularly in the renewables world, I thought numbers 1, I did write them down, 1, 6, 8, 9 and 10 are ones that if you're looking to do something, try and be mindful of those. And yeah, there's a lot of support out there. That's the good thing to state. Carola and I are both either current or past board members of Community Energy Scotland. It's there to help communities develop this. Local Energy Scotland run support schemes for communities to try and develop these projects. With the scale just now, some of the support that was there in the past, whether it's possible to do what Carola and I have done in the past, and I'll be interested to hear about Raasay, I don't know. It might be that we'll be forced to go down to partner with a commercial developer, but we'll see. Anyway, that was me.
Thanks very much, Donald. Now I'm going to pass to Artemis and Rosie. You've got a completely different scheme to talk about, and very recent, and I think you're just almost coming to the end of your building works and operations.
Completed.
Excellent. Over to you.
It's really nice to see some shareholders here, actually, from Raasay. But welcome, everybody. I'm Artemis, and this is Rosie. Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Artemis, and this is Rosie, and this is Raasay. And we're just up the road and over the water, and we frequently get compared to another island. This is an island, Manhattan, lots more people than us, no community-owned microhydros though. So Rosie and I wonder what they do for fun there, but you should all come to Raasay, that's a fact. We've got it all. We've got really old kind of housing stock. The village was built as a prisoner of war camp during the First World War. We've got diesel cars. That's my neighbor burning coal. We've got a distillery, which is a very high emitter. So we are a lovely island, a bit of a transition headache, which is Rosie's headache. She's the carbon neutral islands officer on the island. But we do have these 2 hydros. I'm going to have to wear my glasses now. And which is why we're here today. I think Rosie and I felt that there was not much point going into the detail of how we build them, because in a way, and this was echoed by the other presenters, no community will ever be able to do this again in the same way because of the lack of subsidies, no more feed-in tariffs. So suffice to say, it took us a long time. We raised a lot of money. We had a lot of help. We used community shares. But the only way our particular project could use those community shares is because we had the feed-in tariffs. If we did not have a guaranteed income, this is critical, the route to market, we could not offer shares. So the route to market or a guaranteed income from your projects will be what we need to focus on to make community energy projects work in 2023 and beyond. The other thing we need to be focusing on is the private sector, but micro businesses, tiny, tiny, tiny micro businesses. We talk about communities with support from Highlands and Islands Enterprise and DETAS and Community Energy Scotland and CARES, but the reality is that the design and the build and the maintenance is little sole traders, it's tiny micro businesses, and as communities we need to really be holding them up and saying there's a codependency there. That narrative, I don't think, happens enough at the moment. So they will also be key to making energy projects work for 2023. Rosie and I will talk about some of the practical stuff that we've learned that we think will be very applicable to other communities. Governance is probably one of the most practical things. Yes, it might seem very rigid and bureaucratic and sometimes quite scary, governance and boards and things like that. But actually what we've learned is that you can make governance your own. You can own your governance. Like you can write your governing documents, your contracts yourself. Give yourselves that freedom, anticipate the future, build positive relationships with your development trust like you have with your parish councils, like Galston has with community landowners across the whole of the island. So for us, we've written our own deed of covenant, which covers the relationship between the development trust and our own community benefit society. That will dictate how the community benefit fund is delivered. But also, this is something the community feels very strongly about. We've got a clause in our deed of covenant that says that 5% of profits will go to projects off island, perhaps internationally. Now, as a tiny island, we're dependent on Applecross, we're dependent on Sconser, we're dependent on Braes. These are the communities around us. We are dependent on all other communities across the world. And this is our way of saying, let's build that dependency. So any other communities who are interested in pooling and doing that thing, please talk to us. I'm going to hand over to Rosie now to talk some technical sense.
Yeah, so can everyone hear me? Yeah, cool. So there are a huge amount of benefits to community renewables. Most of you will probably know that having a community-owned renewable asset is so much more beneficial for your community than just receiving the generic £5,000 per megawatt community benefit payments from these big companies. If you've got community-owned renewables, obviously you get a direct income that you can choose what to do with. But there are also other social benefits. So for us, anyway, we sell our electricity to the grid at about 13 pence a unit, and everyone else on the island has to buy it back for almost double that. So going forward, if there was a way, if we could sell our electricity to our local community or use it locally, we could offer a substantial discount and make a positive impact on stuff like fuel poverty, which is a big issue in a lot of rural communities. There's also things that I'll talk on in the next slide, like demand behaviour and stuff that we would like to influence. Community carbon emissions, this is an interesting one. So currently with our community project, because we put it onto the grid and all Raasay's electricity comes directly from the grid, we can't influence the carbon emissions of our electricity theoretically on paper. But if you can prove that the electricity that you're generating is being consumed locally and not just exported off, then you can directly influence the carbon emissions of your island's electricity and have a positive impact there. There are some constraints, obviously. There's UK government policy at the moment doesn't allow community organisations to directly sell their electricity. Grid infrastructure, so we've got a constraint on we're constrained to 50 kilowatts at the moment, which will hopefully be lifted when the grid upgrade comes along. But even now, if you're applying for more community renewables, all of that capacity that's being released when the grid upgrade comes is already being taken up. so you're right back to where you started again. And lastly, as Artemis touched on, feed-in tariffs no longer exist, which is a substantial barrier. So things that we're looking to do to kind of overcome some of these constraints, we've done some private wire feasibilities, so looking at directly supplying, say, our community shop or other assets on the island. These stuff needs to be quite close to your connection point, otherwise you can incur some significant costs. We're also looking into something quite exciting called energy local. So this is kind of getting around that constraint of not being able to sell your energy locally. You create a kind of community energy co-op, and through working with some electricity suppliers, you can kind of sell your energy locally. It's a bit, I can't explain it all right now, but if you look at them online, then they've got a really good explanation of what they do. And we are actually, through funding through the Carbon Neutral Islands project, our Raasay Community Renewables, we're hosting training with Energy Local. So any communities that would be interested in looking into this, then you're more than welcome to get in touch and take part in the training. And lastly, this is more of a, I suppose, Carbon Neutral Islands hat on. Can we create a local energy system or an actively managed microgrid on Raasay? Something that would encourage demand-side regulation, mitigate all the grid constraints and benefit the community. I think we could. There might be some policy and stuff that may prevent it, but it's such a great idea for small projects, and I personally think it's more feasible for small projects like us to do it compared to these huge community projects. I suppose one thing that we really need, I should say, lastly, before I stop, is smart meters, which we are really struggling to get anyone to install smart meters on Raasay. They can, but they just won't come up and do it, and that's the first step that we need to take to actually achieve any of this. So I'll pass back over to Artemis.
Just one final slide, and thank you, Rosie. I think I'm going to use a bad word here, but one of the things that piss us both off. Yes, sorry. One of the things that really annoy us about being in the community sector is really this pressure as communities. We get very good at doing things. You know, like over the 8 years that it took us to build a hydro, we got good at building hydros, and then you get good at building houses, and then you have to move on and build a pontoon or whatever. So you're jumping from one kind of development project to another. So as I said, after 8 years, we've got a huge amount of expertise in building hydro, but the hydro market has really kind of dried up. Not because it's not needed, but because, as Rosie said, government, both the UK and the Scottish government, has moved the goalposts in a bid to get the nation to net zero in particular ways. So at the moment there's no subsidy for hydro, but our question was, does this make it impossible to build hydros for other communities? Our organisation, Raasay Community Renewables, applied to the Highland Council for a small amount of money to do a feasibility study on 2 hydro sites on Skye. We ended up with 3 hydro sites, and many communities on Skye approached us actually and just said, can you look at our site, can you look at our site, can you look at our site? So there's clearly a need there. The feasibility study looked at whether Raasay Community Renewables, as a community organisation in partnership with micro-businesses, could make these projects viable. Could they give it a route to market through clustering them as well to reduce costs? So we're just waiting now for Highland Council to approve and release our report. But the answer to those questions was yes, we can make these projects viable and not dependent on grant monies if either we're able to use the electricity we generate locally, or CEN, so that's our DNO, our network distribution agency, reduces or increases the grid constraints so that we're not constrained when we connect. Ideally, both happen. So both these developments are actually very possible. And it's up to us really as communities to push and say we need this. We need you to lift grid constraints for us, and we need you, UK government, to allow us to sell our electricity locally. So hopefully a bit of food for thought there. And yeah, don't give up hope.
Thanks, Rosie and Artemis. So 3 really quite different projects there, and obviously I'm involved with Egg, and that's completely different all over again. And what's interesting, what they've done on Egg, which we talk about a lot, is that they've actually managed that the demand side. So it's a limit on every house, and if you go over your limit, there's a switch that's tripped and you have to call someone out, and you only do that several times before you get a name in the pub for being the person that has their tumble dryer and their hairdryer on at the same time. So there's actually lots of ways, I think, that communities, in terms of what you're doing on Raasay and, you know, looking at other projects on Skye, that we actually need to share that learning that the really big generators will never think about. They're never thinking about actually what do people use, or how can we share that expertise, or say what Donald's doing at Huntly and thinking about how do we bring hydrogen as part of this. So we have a really great story to tell, and I'm looking at my colleagues now on Community Energy Scotland board, so I hope you're doing it, Donald. Yeah. Right, have we got any questions from the audience? Yeah, gentleman at the back.
Really great to hear about those projects. Obviously, they're fairly large scale. I know not necessarily the same as big boys, but for me, I'm interested in really small scale. Talking about maybe just for one building, something that just needs to be on grid over here, but not necessarily feeding energy into the grid or a community. Do you have anything that you could say in regard to really small scale renewable kind of setup systems?
Anyone wants to take that?
Well, we have lots of examples in Lewis of community buildings that will have 1 or 2 small turbines, a couple of 5 kilowatt, 6 kilowatt turbines. Community buildings. There's a sports centre up at the very north end that I was involved with a little bit when it was being built. It has 2 6 kilowatt turbines and 10 kilowatts of solar on its roof, which is a big solar. £60.
What's the kind of cost associated with something like that?
Well, it's huge, you know, and it was actually built way back when we got European funding to do renewable energy bits with it. The ones in more recent years have all benefited from feed-in tariff when the feed-in tariff scheme was working, until except the ones that you couldn't have feed-in tariff and a grant, so there's that slight problem. But, and they all have made a great difference, I think, to the running of a community hall. You know, you just get that extra bit of electricity for free. And you get a bit of income too. It's brilliant, but it doesn't work anymore as far as I know, you know, in the same way it used to. Community Energy Scotland was involved in these small scale things for communities all over, particularly probably the Highlands and Islands, but spreading all over Scotland.
Yeah.
But I'm not up to date on these things, sadly.
Can I offer some three of us here live on boats, and we're all completely off grid, as you have to be on boats, but we're also recently priced up a solar installation for a community building in our estate, and it's going to be incredibly small scale, because in this particular building we're not going to expect the power to heat anything, and that's the biggest factor. You know, so you ask yourself what you want the power for, and there'll be clear limits of what you use it for, and energy prices, lighting, absolutely not heating, because that's the biggest single factor in determining the scale of the installation you want to put in. Probably a lot colder up here. So the heating is a big issue. So I would look at what you wanted to achieve in designing it. But it doesn't it's very small scale, it's not that expensive.
Thank you, that's really helpful. I think Artemis, were you going to come in as well, and then
Somebody using microphones, please.
Oh yes, yeah, okay.
Some people were asking a question.
All right, Michael, are you able to help? Yeah. Artemis, did you want to come back there? Something?
I think, actually, I don't know if this is on.
Is it just press the button at the bottom here?
Is it at the bottom? Can you hear me better? No, probably not.
Yeah. Can you use
This
this?
one.
All right, thank you. I think basically to build on what the gentleman at the back was saying, which is, at what point you get a really, really small installation and why you would use that installation. The best way to look at transitioning, whether you're an individual household or whether you're a village, is to look at it collectively, because the grid and the energy system is not isolated, it's an ecosystem. So every small bit that you add to it will build up a bigger picture. Does that make sense? It's probably different if you're on a boat, but an interesting ecosystem. But within a village, if you've got certain people who do have solar, then there's no reason why that cannot be part of the energy picture of your local village. And that needs to be thought of, and it can be incentivized in different ways. And the more you think of it in that kind of ecosystem, the more likely you are to raise money to do the small, because you've got the big picture. Does that make sense? So it's what Rosie was talking about in terms of an actively managed network.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Just two brief points to build on what you've just heard. One is that we've worked with a commercial developer on looking at really small scale stuff. It's the zero use of system charges, so it's a way to do stuff behind the meter, if you like, and it's about small scale micro renewables on roofs and air source heat pump and all that type of stuff. And that company is probably going to start providing those services, those actively managed services, fairly shortly. So that's coming. That's there. We're modelling, using Hunt as a model for the energy system of the future, as they call it.
Is that energy circle?
It's the company's called Locogen at that stage, but it's probably a similar thing to energy circle. And then the other thing is just very, very basically is the CARES scheme through Local Energy Scotland is, as at the last I heard, was still offering community building grant support for renewables within buildings, which of course should be well insulated before we can start.
There's a gentleman at the back, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I'm Joe Lewis from West Kilbride Community Initiative. It's really hard to not think that we've sort of missed the boat on this in terms of subsidies versus if you were starting a process like this now today, but I just asked the panel what tips you would have, and maybe where would you think of going to raise the revenue to underpin these developments?
Well, I mean, Community Share Scotland is still a really good approach for all the reasons that you've talked about already. It's about raising the money, but it's also about creating that network of contacts and sort of selling your scheme more broadly. So, and obviously there's the Community Share Scotland team that are really good at giving advice, and they've got small grants to help you start off with the feasibility. So, to me, that's a really good place. But other thoughts from the panel?
That's a really good question. It's the one we're facing just now in terms of whether and how we can progress that wind, solar, hydrogen project. We were fortunate enough to get a sort of investigatory grant from the CARES scheme, and it's proved that the project, that feasibility has proved the project is viable. In the past, you had write-offable loans, sort of development loans, to get you to the next stage potential to planning. Those don't seem to exist anymore. Partly, I think, because the feeling is that the scale of projects that's going to have to come forward are so big that communities can't do it, which seems, give us the chance again to prove it first whether we can or not. So it's looking like at the moment we're probably going to have to go down the route of where we are of partnering with a commercial developer who has the deep pockets to be able to do this. And it feels that, again, that's missing. That's missing the boat a wee bit for what we could achieve.
I'm sorry, I was just saying, and there'll be some places where the private sector are interested and some places where they're not. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Sorry, go on, Carola.
I think one of the things that with ourselves looking at future projects, one of the things that is really difficult is that the electricity market that you sell into used to be reasonably predictable. You know that, okay, so if we produce so much, we'll get between that and that. We'll get that in a good year, that in a bad year, and there's always the off-gem export tariff to fall back to. The electricity market has gone sky high. So in some ways, you could now look at a project and say, actually, we can pay off that bank loan quite easily. but it's gone sky high, and all the forecasts are that it's going to come back down till we get to 2030. So you don't really want that when you're looking at your cash flows over the next 7 years. But even in 2030, they're saying that for your larger projects, you know, it'll be about £100 a megawatt hour or something. So, you know, you can start to think that you're going to get more back in terms of actually what you're selling. So you need lower grants because you can pay off more bank loans. But also, that's another reason why you're pushed to go big, and that's not easy if you want to be small. Who wants to be big when you want to be small? But it's worth thinking about. But you can't plan in the way we used to be able to plan, or anybody used to be able to plan on what you'll get back if you sell anything.
I think Carola's point about do you want to be big or small is really at the problem. It's like, why are you doing this? You know, why do you want the development in the first place? Is it because you want to make a profit? You're going to go for a different form of investment than if you're wanting to decarbonize, and that's why you're doing it. You will probably compromise on the profit and do different things and choose a different finance model. If you're wanting to do it to alleviate fuel poverty locally and you're designing something so that people can use the energy, you're going to go all out. So there are easy routes depending on what it is that you want to do. My worry is at the moment that the government is pushing all communities down that really easy route. Go on guys, get some community benefit. You know, we'll give you a few peanuts. And that for me is a bit, it's good, you know, like I never say that community benefit is not a good thing, but there is a picture there where communities need to self-determine what it is they want to get out of these developments and follow those journeys themselves with support of other communities, Carola and you know, people like that. Don't I'm going to be so awkward about that, so sorry.
Thanks, Artemis. I think we've just got one last question, the lady here, if it's a quick one. Yeah.
Actually, sort of explained by you, I was thinking more about the ethics of community energy, that we live in a system where we need to make money because there's no money to get anywhere else, so you tend to go bigger and bigger and bigger. I'm not saying that's what's driving Lewis, but it's a real worry when you're producing energy that people can't afford and you're community-based. And when are you going to be in a position to just provide free energy for your community, and how you make that ethical decision between bringing in money and paying bank loans and actually being a sustainable local community which provides all the resources it needs for that community.
Thank you. I don't know, Artemis, do you want to pick that up, or Carola?
Well, we hope very soon, but yeah, we're waiting. It's currently going through Westminster, isn't it? You know, the legal side of that. We've looked. There are several community generators on the Western Isles. We have 21 megawatts installed of wind generation between our community generators. Is this? Okay, we have 21 megawatts installed between community generators in the Western Isles. So we've looked over the years at using our electricity for our community, and there's the figures that you gave of the difference in what you're paid for it and what people are paying for it, which is so frustrating. We've had several studies done and all sorts of things, and we've never really got there yet. But we're very hopeful that we might in the future. That's certainly what we would like to do. It's interesting too, people in our community sometimes say to me, so am I using the power from our turbines? But you're selling it to somebody else. And I say, well, actually, it's the electricity that's coming into your house, because if it's generated there, it'll be in your house. But yeah, you're buying it from somebody else. You know, you're buying it from whoever you buy your electricity from. We sell it to Octopus. Octopus are coming out with some quite interesting things about how people near to turbines, where they buy the electricity, can then get reduction in their electricity when the turbines are working. But what do you need? You need a smart meter in every house for that. And we can't get smart meters either because nobody wants to come to Lewis, so it's not just Raasay.
Well, I think I'll probably have to leave, you know, so we've all got time for a cup of tea.
But there's
thank our speakers for